My goal in this speech is to introduce the theme for the year, which is the looking glass self. I wanted to thank Dee Dee Irvine. Dee Dee, where are you? Wave. Thank you, Dee Dee. Dee Dee did the artwork for this, which was really cool, I thought. And so some of you might have already had the chance to read the description for this year's theme, the looking glass self. If you didn't, you probably still would be able to access it. I emailed it a couple of weeks back. I do encourage you to check that, so that you can formulate your own thoughts and opinions that might wind up serving as a good starting point for engaging in what I hope to be a series of engaging and provocative activities this year. So when the club leaders and I began to think about and discuss the topic for the year, the looking glass self, not surprisingly, there was a good amount of banter. All positive for the most part, even from Nate. Where are you, Nate? Yes, even from Nate. I love Nate. We decided on pursuing the looking glass self as our theme for the year because we felt that it was a great way to build upon the great work that so many of you did last year with Layers and the year before that with Eyes and Arms Wide Open. An interesting little story about how we derived the theme from the looking glass self. So some of you may know I have sort of a moonlighting career. It's not really a career, but a moonlighting job as a reader for a test prep company during the high times of academic hell, known as the SAT. So every prep season presents its series of wildly general and mind-numbingly generic essay questions and topics ranging from, is the world changing for the better, to can success be disastrous, to do changes that make our lives easier necessarily make them better, a whole bunch of real weird generic and general topics. So as you can imagine, reading 80 of these essays per week can make any person lose his hair. So this is, although that occurred. Yeah, I had to get that one in there, but that actually occurred. So there was one essay prompt that caught my attention a while back, in a good way, I think. And it wound up serving as the inspiration for the theme of the looking glass self. And the prompt was this: do we need other people to understand ourselves? Do we need other people to understand ourselves? How appropriate, how philosophical, I thought. And how so obviously apparent to 90% of the writers who make the mortal sin of opening an essay with one word, and that word is yes. Yes, by the way, is not a sentence. You should never open an essay by saying yes, ever. It does not constitute a sentence. But I thought, how in line with the school's motto was this question? The school's motto being know thyself. So I thought to myself, why not try to take some of the mental sting out of reading 80 essays per week, all of which started with the word yes, and turn the process into something super productive, and I hope inspiring. A good idea, no doubt. So what is the looking glass self all about? This is a question that some of you have approached me with already. I don't really know how to answer the question fully, but I'll say this. If you had enough hours to listen through some dissertations that have already been done on the topic, you'd either be bored out of your skulls or completely bored out of your skulls. So I'm going to try to make my explanation a bit brief, and I'll offer you a story of why the topic is meaningful to me. The looking glass self is a philosophical idea that was posited in the early 20th century by the philosopher Charles Horton Cooley. At this point, I'm going to resist the temptation to quote from Wikipedia, so I will leave its description at this. The looking glass self is a concept that suggests that we are able to gain a far better understanding of ourselves by viewing ourselves through the eyes of other people. In my view, this description does not mean that it's all about worrying about what other people think of us, right? Which we can sometimes fall into the trap. And also a notion that seems to butt up against our call to be ourselves, right? Rather, I believe that the real meaning behind the looking glass self rests in our ability to to be as truly and relentlessly empathetic as possible in an effort to know ourselves more fully and an effort to help those around us more completely. In other words, by investing our attention in how others who are not like ourselves view their own worlds, the challenges that they face, the joys they experience, etc., we become better able to recognize the things that contribute to our own senses of individuality. This increased sense of individuality, therefore, can be the catalyst for our helping others in a more profound sense, because the help we give comes from our more authentic selves. So I'm super excited to see how this year unfolds, all of the dynamics that are embedded in the understanding of the looking glass self. For me, in my own reflecting, this year's theme has already provided me some guidance and clarity when I think back to some experiences I had when I was in college and how those experiences have changed over time. And so I'm going to talk about one of my close friends from college, and I'll show you a picture. So these were actually pictures that were taken in Florida when we did our spring training for baseball. And Dave Heslin, the person about whom I'm going to speak, is the gentleman with all of the dirt all over him. It was a really funny story. Our coach made us go for, our coach was also the cross-country coach, so he liked to have us run long distances, like super long distances. And if you've been in Florida, you probably are familiar with the Florida massive rainstorms, massive thunderstorms. Well, we happened to go on a long distance run on one of these afternoons, and Dave decides it's a great idea to try his version of slip and slide. Anyway. So one major player in these experiences that I'm going to talk about is my friend Dave Heslin. I met Dave when he was 18. We were all 18 as a freshman at Vassar. And it was an easy and seamless introduction as we were both playing baseball. And given that I didn't know any upperclassmen on the team at this time, I tended to congregate with the players in my year, probably like many of you do here. Dave was actually the first person I played catch with to warm up before a fall season practice. He grew up in Jersey. We're going to forgive him for that. And despite the fact that he was a Yankees fan, I guess I would forgive him for that too, I still thought he was a pretty cool guy. Dave's most prominent physical feature, which is actually not fully developed in these pictures, because these when we were freshmen, his most prominent physical feature to the members of the team were his enormously thick and long sideburns. They were massive. Dave's sideburns were so thick that I wonder how he could possibly have seen the ball coming at him when he was in play. Honestly, mind you, Dave was an incredible hitter. He was one of the best players I've ever played with. He was our third baseman. So it's clear that his facial hair really didn't get in the way too much. So as you could probably imagine, on close-knit teams, it's typical, I think, that upperclassmen choose to give the newbies nicknames. Most of them were wildly uncreative. For example, my friend Nick's was Brockwa. His last name was Brockert, so they called him Brockwa. I don't know why. My friend Sean was the Iron Monkey. I don't know why, but he was very strong, and they thought he looked like an iron monkey. My friend Nate's was Nate Dog, and I'm going to share a little bit of tidbit of mine, and this may not leave this room, you may not call me this, but mine was Ganasty.
Did I call you Gnolfo?
May not call me. Anyway, Dave's appropriately enough was, and wildly uncreative, right? Dave's appropriately enough was Chapo. Right, so I'm gonna refer to him as Chapo. And it's perfectly apropos because of his mutton chops on the side of his face, right? So as you could probably imagine, Chapo took this name and he ran with it, right? And he seemingly evolved from a mere human being named Dave to a mythical character who was apt to do crazy things on the baseball field. And this is a really funny story if you just give me a couple of minutes to tell it. The most telling moment of this was, outside of his stellar play, because he was a great player, was the time he showed up to a home game against Skidmore, not having eaten breakfast. This is in the fall of our sophomore year. So even when Chapo was a freshman, he had won the starting job at third base, and he batted cleanup for us, which is a really strong position in the lineup. So an underfed Chapo would not serve us well against one of our main rivals. After we take the field in the first inning, I peered into the third base area from center field because I noticed that Chapo kept reaching under his cap between pitches and tossing unknown objects fairly discreetly on the grass next to him. Right? I was baffled. Baseball is a hard enough game to play when you have zero distractions, but if Chapo had been getting attacked by a plague of head lice during the game, I could not imagine how difficult it would be for him to play. So, like, what's going on? So after the half inning ended, I sprinted in from center field and I go up to him and I say, like, are you okay? And his response was simply, yeah, I'm fine, Russell. Just starving. Okay, so I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but it turns out that he was actually pulling from under his cap chicken wings that he had eaten the night before. I mean, just I guess I had to see it. I don't remember how he hit in that game, but given his talent, I wouldn't be surprised if he had gone 4 for 4, and that was Chapo. Chapo went on to have, after college, a pretty solid life by many estimations. He married a beautiful woman, he had 3 beautiful children, he earned his PhD in biochemistry, he worked as a research scientist for a renowned New York hospital. He was wildly successful in many ways that we would estimate, right? And the group of us baseball players who had entered Vassar together in 1996 never really fell out of touch. We did a lot of things to stay in contact with one another. We connected at alumni games, we chatted about our favorite Major League Baseball teams, we played in fantasy baseball leagues together. We were, as they say, thick as thieves, and we still are. We still keep in really good touch. So anyway, fast forward a little bit to just about this time last year, last February.